What if I told you Spooky's mansion doesn't actually exist? Okay, maybe that's a little dramatic. I'm not saying the building itself is fake. That would make the entire game kind of pointless. But I do think what we experience through the game is heavily distorted. In other words, I think the mansion is one giant hallucination. Now, before you click off and tell me I completely lost it after room 1000, hear me out. When it comes to our main character, we actually know very little. They're a history enthusiast, they have medium length hair, suspiciously red eyes, and apparently the arm strength of a professional lumberjack because they can carry an axe around for hundreds of rooms without complaining once. But despite knowing so little about them, I think the game quietly tells us one more very important detail. They're mentally vulnerable. The biggest piece of evidence comes from Specimen 7. If you've never taken the time to read the cat DOS entries, first of all, shame on you. And second of all, that's where half the lore is hiding. Specimen 7's entry specifically mentions that it is only effective on subjects with previous trauma or a history of psychological issues. Since Specimen 7 is absolutely capable of affecting our character, that means we fit the requirements. And that's not the only specimen. Specimen 5, also known as Bab, is described as being especially effective against people with weak wills or existing psychological issues. That's two separate monsters whose abilities specifically rely on their victim already struggling mentally. That doesn't sound like a coincidence. Instead, it sounds like the game is quietly telling us that our protagonist isn't exactly in a healthy state of mind before they ever step foot into the mansion. And if that's true, then suddenly a lot of the mansion starts making more sense. For starters, let's talk about the layout. The mansion completely ignores the laws of physics. Rooms endlessly rearrange themselves, hallways stretch on forever, entire sections appear and disappear. The architecture is constantly shifting, and some rooms physically could not exist next to each other. Now yes, Spooky is a ghost. She probably has a pretty good contractor. But even supernatural buildings have to have some internal logic. Spooky's mansion doesn't. It's almost like the environment isn't a real place at all, but rather something our mind is trying and failing to make sense of. Then we arrive at one of the strangest moments in the entire game, room 406. Up until this point, the game trains you to do one thing: run. Every hallway looks the same, every specimen wants to kill you, and standing still is generally considered a bad career move. Then suddenly, there's a wall, and written on the floor are the words, "Threshold of Consciousness." Not danger, not boss ahead, Threshold of Consciousness. That's a very specific choice of words. Once we step across it, the wall crumbles away, revealing a massive clock in the distance and a mysterious character simply called the White Cat. Or, let's be honest here, Pink Cat. We'll call it White Cat because that's apparently what the credits decided. Then, the atmosphere completely changes. Instead of endless hallways, we're placed into this calm, dreamlike space. The music becomes peaceful, almost comforting, while still feeling just unsettling enough that you know something isn't right. After talking and exploring for a bit, the White Cat says something that completely changes how I view this scene. The mask you wear serves its purpose well, but be careful not to lose yourself in it. That mask isn't referring to a literal object, it's referring to a persona, the version of ourselves that we present to everyone else. Sometimes our persona reflects who we really are, but other times it's something we build to hide parts of ourselves, to fit in, to protect ourselves, to become someone society expects us to be. But if our protagonist already has unresolved trauma or psychological struggles, then this line suddenly sounds much less like a cryptic ghost dialogue and more like genuine advice. The White Cat isn't talking about surviving monsters. It's talking about surviving yourself. Then, the nearby computer room doubles down on this idea. It displays messages like, be part of something, put on your mask, follow the group. You are not you. Become more than yourself. These aren't instructions for escaping the mansion. They're all about identity and conformity. They're about losing your sense of self. Then, in the next room, we're completely alone with the white cat in what looks like outer space. No monsters, no chase sequence, and surprisingly, no cheap jump scares. The white cat tells us balance is the key to keeping your mind free and sane. Notice something? This entire encounter barely talks about the mansion at all. Instead, it focuses almost entirely on our mental state. The white cat tells us balance is the key to keeping your mind free and sane. Notice something? This entire encounter barely talks about the mansion at all. Instead, it focuses almost entirely on our mental state. Our identity, our sanity. This sequence isn't taking place in a physical location, it's taking place inside our own mind. And that's why I think the mansion isn't haunted. It's being filtered through the protagonist's fractured perception. The monsters are still real enough to hurt us. The mansion itself may very well exist. But what we actually experience isn't objective reality. Every impossible hallway, every shifting room, every surreal environment, every bizarre conversation. They're all being interpreted through someone whose mind is already unstable before the journey even begins. Which honestly makes Spooky's mansion even scarier, because the greatest threat isn't just the specimen chasing you, it's the fact that you can no longer trust what you're seeing. And if that's true, then maybe the real horror of Spooky's jump scare mansion was never escaping the mansion itself, it was about escaping your own mind. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your own theories in the comments because this game has way more hidden lore than people give it credit for.